I mean, honestly, like, some people will always like a book better than a movie, and some people will like a movie better than a book, but like, I think that, like, we just did our best the book and honor the fans, and I think really make something that works even by itself. We all have believe that if you read the book and you saw the movie that you wouldn't be thrilled. Like, we really worked hard on that. Yeah. But I also saw the movie and then read the book, you wouldn't go, hold on, this isn't like, you can really, like, you can do either, because they're both really beautiful.
Blake Lively is back, and once again, she is asking for sanctions. By now, this is not the first time. It may be the 7th or 8th request of its kind. Each time, the heart of the dispute changes slightly, but the rhythm remains familiar, an argument over fairness, discovery, and what each side believes the other has withheld. This latest motion focuses once again on what has come to be called the birth video. It is a piece of evidence that has hovered over the case for months, a recording provided by Wayfair during discovery. Blake says it is not the same video she remembers seeing, or that what she was shown was not what has been produced in evidence. Wayfair insists otherwise. At first glance, it may appear to be a simple disagreement about a file. But to those who have followed the case closely, it represents something larger, a question of truth, perception, and the meaning of proof in a digital age. When this latest filing appeared on the court docket, many observers immediately recalled her earlier motion concerning what she described as a smear campaign and a series of signal chat messages. In that earlier motion, Blake's attorneys argued that the use of encrypted messaging and the automatic deletion settings within it were themselves signs of intent, that the missing messages might have contained harmful or malicious content. In short, she claimed that the deletion or absence of data should be taken as evidence of wrongdoing. From her side, the argument was clear. If communication records vanish in a case like this, that disappearance itself should speak volumes. Wayfair's legal team disagreed. They said that using secure messaging apps is not proof of misconduct, that it is simply how many people communicate in a modern business setting. While those arguments were still echoing through filings, Wayfair filed a request of its own, an extension of time to respond. They asked to file their reply after their summary judgment motions were complete. To the surprise of some, the judge approved it, and Blake's team did not object. For legal analysts watching, this moment stood out. If her side truly wanted an urgent decision, why not oppose a delay? Some began to see the filing as a possible public relations move, a motion intended less to win in court and more to influence the ongoing conversation outside of it. By granting the extension, the court effectively pushed Wayfair's deadline into late November or December, giving them months before a reply would even be due. That quiet procedural moment changed the tempo of the case. It meant that what had seemed like a sudden escalation was, in reality, just another step in a slow, drawn-out rhythm. Then came another late-night motion, this time returning once more to the topic of Jamie Heath and the birth video. To some who follow legal media closely, it felt familiar. The wording, the timing, and the framing resembled the previous filings about the signal messages. In these new papers, Blake's attorneys again sought strong remedies, asking the judge not only for sanctions but also for specific jury instructions, financial penalties, and acknowledgments of fault. Essentially, they were saying, the other side acted improperly, and the jury should be told to view the evidence through that lens. Wayfair, in turn, prepared their own replies. Their approach has been consistent, calm, procedural, deliberate. They rarely match the emotional tone of Blake's filings. Instead, their strategy has been to frame these motions as distractions, motions that appear when the case moves into a critical phase. The pattern, as some observers note, is telling. Each new filing tends to appear shortly before a larger decision or a turning point in the broader case, as though each motion serves a dual purpose, one for the judge and one for the court of public opinion. Outside of the courtroom, commentators have drawn parallels to their own legal experiences. In one such case, a journalist described facing similar procedural battles, moments when opposing parties filed sudden injunctions or emergency motions just as major rulings were due. It's a strategy sometimes used to shift the focus or to create a pause while new narratives are formed. The journalist explained how, in her own lawsuit, a summary judgment had partially dismissed her claims while allowing others to continue. When her team asked for reconsideration, the court unexpectedly granted it, a rare outcome that signaled potential judicial uncertainty about earlier rulings. But as that reconsideration moved forward, her opponents filed a temporary injunction, arguing that her reporting had caused them reputational harm and unwanted public attention. It was a familiar move, a call for silence framed as protection. She argued that this mirrored the pattern now seen in Blake's filings. When the path ahead seems uncertain, a new motion appears, one that reframes the discussion and redirects attention. In her story, the injunction became a symbol, a moment when free speech, investigation, and public accountability collided. In Blake's case, it's not journalism at stake but reputation and narrative control. Yet the legal rhythm feels similar. The journalist's account described how she was accused of fueling hostility online and how her opponents denied any federal scrutiny, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. She said that when pressure rises and outcomes look unfavorable, parties sometimes turn to emotion-based filings, motions that seek to influence perception rather than outcome. And that, she said, is what this new chapter of the Blake Lively versus Wayfair case resembles. When lawyers argue over deleted messages, missing videos, or misunderstood evidence, they are not just fighting about data. They are fighting about what absence means. Does a missing message imply guilt? Does a forgotten video suggest deception? Or are these simply human gaps in memory and record-keeping, things that happen naturally over time? The judge, for now, has shown restraint. Extensions have been granted, responses postponed, and the pace remains deliberate. But each filing leaves an impression, not only on the docket but in the public record, where headlines and social media discussions give every motion a second life. In today's world, courtroom documents don't stay in the courtroom. They circulate online, quoted, reinterpreted, and amplified. And that's why, for many observers, the question of intent becomes larger than the case itself. Is each motion a genuine plea for justice, or a calculated move to keep the story alive in the public's imagination? To the outside eye, it is impossible to say. What can be said is that the birth video controversy remains unresolved, both factually and symbolically. It represents privacy, perception, and pain. It is a reminder that even in the most structured setting, a federal court, emotion cannot be completely removed. For now, the judge's calendar continues to fill. More filings are expected. Each one adds to the weight of a case that has long since moved beyond a simple film dispute. This is now a battle over credibility, consistency, and control of narrative. In legal terms, it is about motions and evidence. In human terms, it is about memory and meaning. And as each side prepares for the next phase, one truth remains. Every motion, every extension, every late-night filing is another performance in a courtroom that has become Hollywood's quietest stage. As this case between Blake Lively and Wayfair continues, another motion has entered the record, one that could shape how her entire claim is seen. Blake has once again asked for sanctions, this time directed at Jamie Heath, over the same disputed piece of evidence, a birth video filmed during an at-home delivery. Her lawyers argue that Wayfair and its affiliates have failed to produce the full and correct version of the video as ordered by the court. According to their motion, only a short, 3-minute excerpt was turned over, while the rest, the footage she says she remembers, has never appeared. They cite Rule 37 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which allows a judge to sanction a party for failing to comply with discovery orders. But beyond the legal language, the deeper question remains, is this about evidence, or is it about control of the story? This motion comes at a crucial time for Blake. Behind the scenes, her case faces serious procedural challenges. There are dispositive motions pending, including one for judgment on the pleadings, that could decide much of the case before it ever reaches a jury. These are not minor filings. If granted, they could potentially dismiss her claims of sexual harassment and retaliation, not because of disputed facts, but because of procedural and jurisdictional law. Her opponents argue that the California labor protections she cites do not apply outside U.S. borders, the concept known as extraterritoriality. They also point out that she may not have followed the standard steps before bringing such claims. In employment law, before filing a lawsuit, a claimant must usually submit a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, and receive what's called a right to sue letter. According to court records, Blake's filings reference a December 2020 notice, but that notice, her opponents argue, does not include it end with us Movie LLC or the correct employing entity. In plain terms, they say she sued the wrong employer. If the court agrees, much of her case could be dismissed on purely procedural grounds. And that is where this new motion for sanctions becomes strategically significant. By asserting that crucial evidence has been withheld, that her ability to prove her claims has been obstructed, Blake may be preparing a narrative for what comes next. If her claims are struck down, she can argue that it wasn't because her case was weak or improperly filed, but because Wayfair and its representatives denied her access to full truth. To her critics, this looks like preparation for an outcome. To her supporters, it looks like persistence in the face of resistance. Either way, it shows how modern litigation is no longer confined to the courtroom. It also plays out in the media, in public opinion, and in the language of narrative itself. Observers of this case have noticed a rhythm in Blake's filings, a series of late-night or last-minute motions, oftentimes just before or after major hearings. Each motion has a similar structure, an allegation that evidence is missing, that a party failed to comply, or that deletion or concealment shows intent. Her earlier filing about the encrypted signal chats followed this pattern. There, she argued that the very act of using auto-deleting messages indicated malice, that the defendants knowingly used technology to hide harmful communications. In that instance, the judge allowed additional time for the defense to respond, and Blake did not oppose a delay. This new motion over the birth video follows that same familiar rhythm, emerging in the gap between critical rulings. To some legal analysts, this signals a strategic effort to stay visible and proactive, even as other parts of the case move towards summary judgment. But this latest filing carries an emotional weight the earlier motions did not. It touches on privacy, consent, and the limits of exposure. According to Blake's motion, the video in question depicts a deeply personal moment, an at-home birth filmed by Jamie Heath, whose wife was the subject of the recording. Blake claims she was shown this footage without prior consent or warning during the production of It Ends With Us. She argues that the experience was distressing and that the video has since become central to understanding her claim of a hostile environment. In her recent filing, she asserts that the version provided during discovery, a short excerpt, is incomplete and fails to represent what she originally saw. Her attorneys say this partial production violates the court's earlier order to disclose the full video. They request that the court impose sanctions on Jamie Heath for noncompliance and require the immediate production of the complete footage. Wayfair's side maintains that they have complied fully with discovery obligations, producing exactly what exists in their possession and within the boundaries of privacy law. To them, the claim of missing evidence is unfounded, and this is where the motion becomes ethically complex. If a longer version of the video exists, and if that footage contains intimate content, then forcing a production would raise serious privacy concerns for those depicted. That includes Jamie Heath's wife, who was in a vulnerable state during childbirth. Legal observers have noted the paradox. In arguing that she was wrong by being exposed to the video, Blake now risks bringing that same private material further into public discussion by making it the centerpiece of motion. One attorney, speaking generally about discovery ethics, summarized it this way: when evidence involves human dignity, the question isn't just what the law allows, it's what decency demands. The court will now have to balance two competing rights, the right to obtain evidence and the right to privacy. Throughout this case, Blake's recollection of events has played a central role. Her supporters describe her as a witness to her own experience, someone standing up for boundaries and accountability. Her critics say her memory has been inconsistent and sometimes selective. In previous matters, she claimed that certain individuals were part of a coordinated smear campaign against her, allegations that were later walked back or withdrawn after subpoenas and evidence reviews. To some, these moments raise questions about perception, interpretation, and how memory can change under pressure. But memory, as psychologists often remind us, is not static. It is shaped by emotion, context, and time. And in the glare of celebrity litigation, those pressures can intensify. Whether her recollection of the video's contents is perfectly accurate or partially shaped by stress, only the court's findings will clarify. But the repeated use of motions based on perceived omissions shows how deeply she believes in her version of events, and how determined she is to have them recognized. Every lawsuit has turning points, moments where the outcome begins to take shape even before the final judgment. For Blake, that turning point may be approaching. The pending motion for judgment on the pleadings could remove large parts of her complaint. If the court agrees that she did not properly identify her employer or file the required pre-suit notices, it could fundamentally change the scope of what remains. At the same time, her repeated calls for sanctions suggest she is building a secondary record, one that argues she was denied a fair chance to present her case. It's a tactic seen before in complex litigation. When legal grounds appear fragile, narrative strength becomes a substitute. For the public, that strategy blurs the line between justice and storytelling. Because every filing, every motion, every press mention reinforces one central theme, that Blake is fighting against forces that she believes have silenced or obstructed her. For now, the judge will have to decide whether Jamie Heath failed to comply with the August 27th order and whether sanctions are justified. The court may also weigh the privacy implications of producing a full birth recording, especially if it involves individuals who are not parties to the case. Meanwhile, the other side continues to press its own arguments, focusing on jurisdiction, procedure, and the limits of employment law. Their position is clear. The case should be decided by the rules, not by emotion. But in this courtroom, as in much of Hollywood, the rules and the emotions rarely move in perfect harmony. And so, as one motion waits for reply and another prepares for hearing, the pattern continues, filings that mix law with story, evidence with perception, and personal truth with public record. What began as a dispute about a film has now become a reflection of something larger, how fame, privacy, and justice collide when the stage lights never truly go dark. The latest motion from Blake feels less like a new legal filing, and more like the latest chapter in a pattern that become all too familiar. For months, she's been fighting on multiple fronts: sanctions, discovery battles, media narratives. And now, once again, she's demanding penalties over what she calls missing evidence. This time, it's about the controversial birth video. To anyone following the case closely, it's deja vu. The tone, the timing, even the claims mirror the previous disputes over the so-called smear campaign and the signal chat messages, the same ones she said proved malice. The same ones she claimed Wayfair and its team destroyed to cover their tracks. Yet every time, when deadlines pass and extensions are quietly granted, the urgency fades. The story shifts, and the audience, both in court and in the public, is left wondering what's real and what's performance. Wayfair, for their part, didn't fight the extension this time either. They requested more time to respond, asked to do so after their motion for summary judgment, and the judge approved. Blake didn't object, not a word of protest. And that silence says more than any filing could. Because when you don't fight the clock, it usually means a filing wasn't meant to win in court. It was meant to win attention outside it. So when she filed yet another motion late into the night, this time targeting Jamie Heath in the birth video, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt calculated. It felt like pressure. To understand why this matters, you have to understand the larger picture. Blake's case, one sprawling with claims of harassment, retaliation, and misconduct, has been steadily shrinking. One by one, her legal claims have faced dismissal, either because they fall outside jurisdiction, weren't properly filed, or failed to name the right employer. And that's where this motion fits in. Because if the judgment on the pleadings goes against her, and it might, the court could rule that her entire case was brought in the wrong forum, against the wrong parties, and without proper administrative filings. That's devastating, not just legally, but publicly. And so, in that vacuum, this new filing appears, a story about missing footage, about hidden truths, about the birth video she swears she saw, but can't produce. The motion paints a dramatic scene. According to Blake, Jamie Heath, the director, once showed her an intimate home video of his wife giving birth, without consent, without warning. She says it made her uncomfortable, that she stopped him, that she questioned whether his wife knew, and according to her, he dismissed her concerns with a smirk, saying his wife wasn't weird about that stuff. It's a disturbing image, the kind of moment that instantly divides opinion. But Wayfair and Heath tell a different story. They say the clip was never explicit, never inappropriate, and that it was shown only to demonstrate the emotional tone of a birthing scene in the film, the kind of artistic reference directors often use. They produce a 3-minute, blurred excerpt to satisfy discovery requirements, and in their version, nothing remotely indecent is visible. Blake disagrees. She says that's not what she saw, and because her memory doesn't match the video provided, she now claims the defendants are hiding the real footage, the one that could prove her story. That single conflict, what she says she remembers versus what they say they produced, has become the heart of this latest fight. Her lawyers argue that he's knowingly and willfully withheld evidence, that is playing word games by interpreting the judge's discovery order too narrowly, and that by doing so, he's deprived her of a fair chance to question him in deposition. They say this is prejudice, plain and simple, and demand sanctions under Rule 37. But to outsiders familiar with the rhythm of litigation, it's a familiar tactic, a way to shift the battlefield. When a case faces dismissal on the law, you pivot to the facts. You turn a legal failure into a factual dispute. Because as long as a fact issue exists, a case can't be dismissed outright. It has to go to trial. And that's exactly what this feels like, a desperate attempt to keep the case alive. Blake insists that the video she saw was not what was produced. Heath insists that it was. That tension, that gap in memory and interpretation, is now being used as a wedge to keep the lawsuit breathing. It's a clever move if you think about it. Because once something becomes a fact issue, the judge can't just throw it out. It becomes a question for a jury. And juries are unpredictable. Still, the deeper issue isn't about the footage itself. It's about credibility. Because if her recollection turns out to be mistaken, if what she swore she saw doesn't exist, then the narrative crumbles. And if she's right, and there truly is another video hidden away, then Wayfair and he face explosive exposure. Either way, the motion ensures one thing. The conversation continues. But that comes with a cost, especially for Jamie Heath's wife, Natasha. According to court documents, the footage in question allegedly shows her fully nude during childbirth. And now, thanks to this filing, that deeply private moment is once again being dragged through the public record. It's a brutal twist, A woman who isn't even part of the lawsuit, whose only connection is being married to a filmmaker, suddenly becomes part of a media circus she never consented to join. This is where the ethics get murky. Because if Blake truly believes this longer version exists, she's essentially demanding that a deeply personal video, one of childbirth, be turned over and potentially viewed by lawyers, judges, and possibly jurors. That's not just discovery. That's exposure. And for a court already dealing with privacy disputes, that's a nightmare scenario. From a legal perspective, her request is built on shaky ground. She's arguing that the defense's refusal to hand over a longer video is a violation of a prior order,